Hello and welcome. My name is John Strand, and in this video we're going to be giving you a nice gentle carrying to the Windows command line. So if anybody ever opens up a command prompt on a Windows computer system, you don't have to dive under your desk and start sucking your thumb. This video is brought to you by Wild West Hackin' Fest. We offer training and a pretty smoking conference. You should check it out. This year in 2020, it's going to be all virtual. We have tons of training, tons of hands-on events, even for virtual attendees. It's also brought to you by Black Hills Information Security, which offers pen testing, blue team services, and threat hunting. It's brought to you by Backdoors and Breaches, an incredibly inexpensive card game to get you used to incident response and many of the topics that we cover in our webcasts. And it is brought to you by AI Hunter, by Active Countermeasures, the world's premier network threat hunting tool. And by the way, the AI stands for actual intelligence, and that's you. So let's jump straight in. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to get you used to how you actually go about opening up the command line. Now, this seems relatively straightforward if you think about it, but it's actually a little bit more complicated than a lot of people that are new think. Let me give you an example. You see, if you're looking at the Windows command line by itself, if you're logged in as an administrator account, it's pretty easy to think that any time you open up a command prompt, you're going to be administrator. Let me show you. So if I log into my Windows 10 virtual machine, this is the Windows 10 virtual machine that we use in our Intro to Security class at Black Hills Information Security. I also use it for my Cyber Deception class as well. I'm going to log in as ADHD. Now, ADHD is actually an administrator account. You would be mistaken if you thought simply by logging in as administrator, you could just simply access any Windows command prompt and be an administrator. However, if I open up a command prompt, or in this situation, the Windows terminal, I can open up multiple command prompts and notice what my command prompt says here. It says Microsoft Windows, gives me a version, gives me the user directory. I am not administrator at all. If I want to open up a command prompt as administrator, I have to right-click on the terminal and select Run as Administrator, and it pops up the User Access Control dialog. I click Yes. Now look very closely at how the command prompts are actually different. So I've got a PowerShell prompt, but now whenever I go to a command prompt, you can see at the top it says Administrator command prompt, Administrator Windows PowerShell, versus just double-clicking on it, it says Command Prompt or Windows PowerShell. So very, very, very easy way to get messed up in a Windows system whenever you're taking an Intro to Security class, because many of the tools and commands that you are required to actually do, they're going to require you to be an administrator. And in our class that we provided, we'll tell you when you're supposed to log in as an administrator. So that seems like fairly basic stuff, right? Just opening up the command line. But yes, it can actually get people stuck from time to time. Let's cover some basics of navigation. How do we actually move around in a command prompt in a way that makes sense? You see, your entire Windows operating system is set up as directories. You're probably very familiar with many directories like the Documents directory, the Downloads directory, maybe you have a Movies directory. You have all these different directories on your system. And with Windows Explorer, you just go clickety-clackety-click through these various directories. However, if we look at the directories through Windows Explorer, it's simply just a matter of clicking on these directories. If we go to the command prompt, we have to use the CD command or the change directories command. So I can go CD and then I hit the backslash, and if I hit enter, you notice that my prompt has just changed. It's actually taken me to the point where I am now at the top level directory of my system. So that's moving me to the top of the directory structure. You can think of these directories as a series of rooms that are interconnected. I'm kind of in the main lobby of my Windows system. If I do dir, it's going to list out all of the directories in this main directory. So these would be child directories of the top level directory. You can see that we have an Atomic Red Team directory, we have a temp directory, we have program files, we have tools. If I want to go to any of those directories, I simply go cd, and then I put in the name of the directory, and I can use tab autocomplete. Tab autocomplete is absolutely essential to any operating system that you're using. You may feel like you're cheating. If I do CD and I hit T and then I hit tab, It can say you can go to temp. If I hit tab again, it gives me tools. Tab is your friend because it helps ensure that you're actually typing things in correctly. Now I'm in the tools directory, and if I go dir again, you can see that all the files here are now different. We have files for BlueSpawn, we have files for Netcat, for password spraying, for Rita, for Sysmon. These are all the files that we use in our intro class. So that is some very, very basic level navigation on a Windows computer system. And if I ever want to clear my screen, I just do CLS, hit enter, and then bang, my command prompt goes right back to what it was before. So very, very easy stuff navigating around the directory. If you've never done that before, it can be somewhat problematic. Now let's kind of jump in on some commands that you could use. And I'm going to focus on commands that you would use in computer security. And we're going to start by looking at commands like netstat. We're going to be looking at the network connections associated with a Windows computer system. So if we start with netstat, if I jump over here and I run netstat, there we go. It's going to show me all of the open network connections on my computer system. So you can see my computer system's IP address, the local address, is 192.168.78.135. That's kind of like a phone number for my computer if I'm using analogies. But this is a local, what we call non-routable IP address. It means it won't route on the internet. It's just built for internal networks. And then you have a colon, and then you have a port. Now, whenever you're talking about ports, with computer systems, all computer systems, there are 65,536 ports times 2. That means you have 65,535 ports for TCP and 65,536 ports for UDP. Now, 65,536, that is actually 16 bits, how many possible values there are. Don't worry about all this. You don't have to memorize all of this. Just know that there's a lot of ports, and they're very much like entry points into your house. You have a front door, you have a back door, you have a window, you have water pipes, you have electrical lines coming in. And whenever you're looking at a computer system, you have these ports, and generally these ports are associated with services. If you want to think about an analogy as a house, let's make it an analogy of a hotel with 65,536 hotel rooms. And if I go to room 80 and I knock on the door, room 80 is usually a web server. If you look at port 443, it's usually encrypted traffic to a web server. So whenever we're looking at these ports, you can see that I have an open connection from 58,156 that's got an HTTPS session with a remote address. Down at the bottom, you can see we have an HTTPS session open up to 52.230.222.68. That's the IP address of a remote computer system. So that is our netstat connections. But wait, there's more. So I can take that netstat command and I can do some really cool things with it. I can do netstat minus NAOB. If I do netstat minus NAOB, my screen gets all weird because magnifier is giving me a problem. What NAOB is going to do is it's going to give me additional contextual information about what are the processes that are making these connections. So if you see this local port of 0 or IP address of 0.0.0.0, it's our local system, is listening on port 135. I can see that that service that's associated with that is the RPC service. I can see that I have some ports that it says cannot obtain ownership information. Anytime you see that associated with the process ID of 4, every single process on a Windows computer system gets a number, right? And the process ID 4 is the system process. So that's the high level startup process. Down here, we have another connection associated with lsas.exe. That's the local security authority subsystem service. We have event log and so on. But if I scroll down, you'll start to see the remote connections that I have and what is actually making those connections. And here you can see that I have a connection to this IP address, which is 23.196.238.101 on port 443, which is an encrypted web server port. Its process ID is 7344, and the actual process here is winstore.app.exe. So let's kind of walk through exactly what's going on here. So what happens is the WinStore app is making a connection to the Windows Store online, and that number is kind of like the phone number of that remote system. And it rings up that computer system on that port by making a full TCP connection. We'll talk about TCP/IP and the three-way handshake and SYNACS and fins and resets and all that in a different video. But it makes a connection to that system on port 443 so it can communicate back and forth. Now, this is incredibly useful to you as a security professional, because if you ever think a computer system is compromised, you can simply look at the network connections and you can start making a determination of what connections are being made and where those connections are actually going to as well. So let's dive into what's actually running on your computer system. Now, on a Windows computer system, there's a whole bunch of what we call services. And these different services and these different processes are running on your computer system. And we can use the task list command to actually dive in to those services. So let's jump in. So with this, I'm going to clear my screen out, move over, and I'm going to run task list. So if I do task list by itself, this is kind of the most boring command in the history of all commands on Windows. You can see that I have WSL host, that's Windows subsystem for Linux host, and we can see that it's got so much memory that's being used and where it was executed. We got PowerShell. Okay, that's just, I'm sorry, that's just really incredibly boring. I apologize. But wait, it gets better. You see, on Windows computer systems and on Linux computer systems, you can actually take those commands and you can make them more effective. Let me explain. So I can do task list, and I can do task list space / let's say SVC, all right? So if I do task list space / SVC, it allows me to see what processes are running and then what service on that computer system started that process. So you can see that I have a bunch of SVC host.exes, and I can see that that services controller host started the audio service. I can see that it started the state repository. I can see that it started the spooler. This is giving me additional context as far as what those executables invoked in the form of services on the computer system as well. So I just lost some signal and we're back. I don't know what actually happened there. That's very, very strange. We have flickering. There we go. So now we can see that we have these various services that started up from these particular processes. But wait, there's more. I can do task list and I can do /m. Now with task list space / m, oh my God, my cursor's going crazy. Let me back out. If I can, there we go. Whenever I do task list space / m, what that is actually doing is it's showing me all the dynamic link libraries that are associated with individual processes. This is key because when you're looking at dynamic link libraries, they're like little books of functionality that will help programs to execute. So there's like a library that'll say, here's how you open and close files. Here's a library on how you copy and paste. Here's a library on how you open up network connections and interact with security and all these different things. Literally think of it like a library with a whole bunch of books. When you run an executable, it invokes these libraries. Now, this is key because whenever I'm doing incident response on a computer system, it allows me to see what library books are associated with an executable. So if we were looking at this in terms of different processes or different attacks that have happened in the past, if I was looking at something like Conficker, I could compare what are the dynamic link libraries that are normally used versus what is actually being used, possibly by the malware on the computer system. This is great, folks, because now you can kind of baseline and identify what it is that the different processes are that are being ran. So my magnifier, which is giving me a little bit of a hard time today in my Windows VM, I can see these are all the dynamic link libraries associated with it. Now, to be completely honest, there are a number of ways that malware can inject itself into a system, and that's okay. That's one way to look at it. It's just one way to think of your operating system and how we can actually access that information from the command line. But once again, wait, there's more. You see, the other thing that we can do is we can extend that particular command as well. Let me clear out my screen here. And I can run task list space / m, and then I can provide a dynamic link library that I'm interested in. When I do that, it says this is literally every single process that is using this dynamic link library. Now, what is the reason why you would want to do this particular command? Well, the reason why you would want to do this command is because if you have a dynamic link library that looks spooky, you can actually dive in and say, is there any other process that is using this spooky sounding dynamic link library? So let's say that you had a dynamic link library of metaserv.dll. That's totally not Sketch at all. Well, you can dive in and you can say NT, or you can run, you can check for that dynamic link library with tasklist space / m, put in the name of the dynamic link library, and if you have one suspicious process and it's the only one using that dynamic link library, that might warrant further, that might warrant further investigation. So that's the task list command. Now with services, I had mentioned services a number of times on this particular video series. When you're looking at services, services are like what we call daemons, or they're services and processes and programs that are starting up when your computer system starts, and some of them continue to run throughout the entire process of your computer running. So like your audio service, for grabbing audio files and playing them back. That would be a service that's running on your computer system. How can you actually look at the services on your computer system? Well, let's dive in. So with services, I can actually take a look at the services just by running the services, SMS, the plugin. So if I do services, I can simply type that in. You can see that I have services app, right? Now I can double click that and it opens it up and it allows me to look at the various services that are running on my computer system. And with these services, I can start and stop these services. That's pretty cool for me to identify from a GUI what is running on. But the services that we'd be the most interested in would be the startup services. And we can actually query that through Windows Management Instrumentation command. So with this, I can run WMIC startup list full. And this is going to show me all the different services that are set to start through WMIC. Now, what's really cool about WMIC is you can query almost every attribute of your computer, all the way down to like your fan speed. You can query your CPU temperature if it's actually supported. There's a bunch of things you can do, and we're not going to get into full WMIC in this particular video. It's a lot to cover, but we are going to cover it in a different video. So that gives you really cool information about the startup list items that'll run from your computer. So now you can start looking at it and saying, do I have any malware that's supposed to start? So if you ever run WMIC startup list full and it pops up and it says evilbackdoor.exe, two things. One, you've been hacked, and two, you've probably been hacked by an idiot. I'm pretty sure it's not a nation state level attack at that point. So that's cool. You got that going for you. All right, let's talk about regedit. On Windows, there's a whole bunch of different, there's a number of different settings that exist for the operating system and for various files. On Linux, they like to use config files for this. On Windows, they like to use the registry. Now, you can get to that just by hitting the little Windows icon, and then do regedit, and then it'll open up the registry editor, and then you can simply click into that. Now, we talk about this a lot within our classes that we do, because the registry editor, we will be using that to identify malicious registry keys, and we'll be using that to identify different settings on a computer system. And we'll get into more detail, but that's how you actually get to your registry editor. Next up, let's talk about connections. How can we look at sessions and shares and sessions in and sessions out? So let's start with just NetView. Now, many attackers, whenever they get on a computer system, they will actually newt. She turned me into a newt, but I got better. All right, so NetView. So what happens with many attackers is they will open up a share on your computer system. And the reason why they will open up a share on your computer system is they will start that share, and then they will start dropping different files on that share. So if I run NetView and I do / 127.0.0.1, that is my local IP address. So if you ever think of it in terms of like, Wizard of Oz, there's no place like home. If you ever see a geek that's wearing a shirt, there's no place like 127.0.0.1. That is a very nerdy person and they're saying there's no place like home. That's whatever I do, backslash, backslash 127.0.0.1, what I get is no entries on this list. That means that there's no shares on my computer. So what happens with many attackers, I mentioned, is they'll create a share, and then they will start moving files to that share to exfiltrate. So they'll make your system a jumping off point for basically moving files off the rest of the network. So that's NetView. Now, the next one that we want to look at, let me open up, there we go, is NetSession. So if I do NetSession, it's showing me how many open connections I actually have outbound from my computer. So if my computer was the attacking computer and was pivoting to other systems, I would be able to see those connections leaving my computer to other Windows computer system. And then finally, NetUse. NetUse says, is there anybody currently connected to my computer system? So if you're ever like, oh, wow, it feels like somebody might be hacking my computer over SMB, this particular situation, no. No one is currently connected to my system at all. So that's looking at those network connections on my computer system going out. Now let's talk about NetUser, NetLocal Group administrators. Another tactic that many attackers like to do is add additional user accounts to a computer. So I can do NetUser, and it shows me all the users that exist on this computer. I have ADHD, default account, administrator, guest, allow list, WDAG, utility account. These are normal for this specific VM. So you'd want to kind of baseline what your normal user accounts are. So now I can do we can do Net Local Group Administrators. So this is now going to show me who are the administrator accounts on this computer system. And now you can see that I have ADHD, I have administrator, are my two administrator accounts on this computer system. Now let's look at scheduled tasks. With SCH tasks, one of the cool things about that is it shows me all of the different tasks that are supposed to fire it up and what time they're supposed to fire. This is actually a persistence mechanism that many attackers will do. They will set up a job that'll run, let's say, it'll run every night at midnight, and then it'll open up the attacker's connection again and again and again. This has literally been around since Hacking Exposed 1999. And yes, we still see attackers that do this exact same type of persistence mechanism to this day, which is really terrifying on the entire state of computer security. Yeah, that's bad if we're using techniques from 1999 today. Finally, let's talk about Event Viewer and security policy. Now, on our Windows computer system, you can check the Event Viewer. You can just go to the little Windows icon, and then you can do EVNT, and then it's going to pop up, and it's going to say you can look at the Event Viewer. Now, generally, as a rule, events on Windows computer systems are garbage. They're actually really, really quite horrible. We're going to talk in the intro class about how we can actually make the events far more useful using Sysmon. With standard events, total complete garbage. With the actual event viewer, it's much, much, much better. All right, so let's move on. We already talked a little bit about WMIC. Now remember, WMIC, we used it just to look for the startup list items, but we're also going to be discussing it in the intro class about how we can query all types of different aspects of your Windows computer system. So we did WMIC startup list full. I'll give you just a hint on some of the things you can do. If I open up my command prompt again as administrator, I can actually run WMIC, and let's do QFE list full. And that's going to show me every single patch that's installed on this computer system. So that's just really good stuff that you can utilize with WMIC. Now NetSH, with NetSH, we can actually change our command line context, but I can do NetSH and I can do WLAN show networks, and it'll show me if there's any wireless networks. Now in this example, I don't have any wireless networks because I'm running inside of a virtual machine that's NATed out. But wait, could we actually look at something with this? Yeah, so what I can do is I can do NetSH, ADV firewall, set all profiles, state on. And with that, I just turned on my firewall with that ridiculously long NetSH command. The The point is, NetSH allows you to do a bunch of things with the networking configuration on a Windows computer system, from turning on and off the firewalls, looking at the wireless networks that are around you, to basic, just simple routing. And you can do things like converting things from IPv6 to IPv4 and vice versa. It's actually pretty insane what you can do with NetSH. Now, one of the things I always want to cover with this is anytime you're ever troubleshooting anything with any command at all, you always boil it down to 3 separate steps. So if you ever have any trouble, you go ping, port, parse. Ping, can I ping a remote system? Port, is the port I'm trying to communicate actually open? And then parse, basically looking at any error messages. So if we look at, I don't think I have Nmap installed. So let's just quickly jump over to a Linux command prompt and I'll show you kind of these steps that we would actually go through. So this is kind of a lead-in to my Linux video, but we'll cover the basics of ping, port, parse. So ping, if I do ping 8.8.8.8, let's go to my desktop, I can ping and I can see I have a connection to Google's DNS server. That means there's network connectivity between me and them. For port, I can do Nmap and I can do 8.8.8.8, and this will take a few seconds, but it's going to tell me what ports are actually open on the remote computer system. If I'm trying to communicate to a remote computer system over a protocol like SSH or SMB or a web protocol, it's not going to work very well if that port isn't open. Once again, going back to the house analogy, we need to make sure that the door or the window or the piping is actually available to us. So here in just a couple of seconds, it's going to come back and it's going to tell me what ports are actually open on this DNS server. Now, a quick note, some people say this is hacking. No, it's not. We're just basically telling ourselves what ports are open on the remote computer system. Is this actually a step that a hacker would go through? Absolutely. But what we're doing here is just simply identifying what ports are open on this remote computer system. And as I hit spacebar, Nmap comes back and it says, okay, we've got 7 seconds remaining. I've got one system that I've identified as up. I'm 87%, 94%, 96%, 97%. By hitting spacebar, Nmap is actually giving me the percentages that it's done. And now we can see that there's 2 ports that are open, 53, which is DNS, which resolves IP addresses and names, and then 443, which is HTTPS. So that's it. That's my intro to the Windows command line, like in less than 30 minutes. Once again, this particular video is part of my Intro to Security class. So if you like it, pretty please check out the Intro to Security class. By the way, the Intro to Security class is pay what you can. If you are new to security, you've never done anything, you have no money, this class is for you. So if you like it, please check it out. Also, do me a favor. I know that all the YouTubers say do this, but hit the subscribe button down below. I know that people like that quite a bit. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you in another video very soon. This episode was brought to you by Black Hills Information Security, specializing in pen testing, red teaming, threat hunting, webcast, open source tools, and blogs. It was also brought to you by AI Hunter from Active Countermeasures. The AI stands for Actual Intelligence. Need a threat hunting solution for the network? Check out AI Hunter. It is also brought to you by Wild West Hackin' Fest, currently offering conferences in San Diego and Deadwood, South Dakota. To check out the schedule and the speaker lineup, check out wildwesthackinfest.com.